All right. Well, welcome everybody to our budget webinar series. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome again to the Brands Alliance Budget Season webinar series. I'll be your host, Joe Vitorino, the Executive Director of Strategy for Planned Companies. I oversee the Brands Alliance. I'll be guiding you through our webinar series today, as well as over the next few weeks as we hear from our various subject matter experts. The Brands Alliance is a consortium of top-tier property service providers, including Amenity Link, American Pool, CertaPro Painters, Heartline Fitness, Live Unlimited, Paul Davis Restoration, and Planned Companies. As best-in-class service organizations, we collaborate to enhance the client experience and improve the quality of life for the residents and tenants that we proudly serve. By sharing our expertise, best practices, and value-added services, we elevate the standards of property management. This webinar series will focus on budget season and will run across the next few weeks in August, when we'll include presentations from various subject matter experts covering 4 distinct topics: facilities, which we covered on Tuesday, aquatics, which we'll focus on today, fitness and wellness on August 22nd, as well as property technology on August 24th. Each of the presentations will be split into 2 segments. Morning sessions at 10 a.m. will be focused on multifamily, as well as afternoons at 1 p.m. focusing on condo and HOA. All of these webinars will be recorded for your convenience, and they can be viewed on demand online following each webinar. Again, Tuesday's session focused on facilities, but more importantly, today's session will be focused on aquatics, presented by Phil Carter of American Pool. Before we dive in, I do want to encourage everyone to feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation using the QA button on Zoom below. Questions will be gathered throughout the webinar, and we'll review them at the end together. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Phil Carter, Chief Operating Officer from American Pool, to kick off our budget webinar series focusing on aquatics. Phil's been in the industry for over 24 years and is celebrating his 20th year with the organization this year. Phil, take it away.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen, but I always want to check and make sure. Yep. Okay. Thanks again for joining us for the aquatics portion of the budgeting series. Really quite excited to share with you some tips and tricks and really give you some insight into our process. American Pool is the largest full-service pool management company in the U.S. with 31 locations currently in 17 states. We manage roughly about 3,000 commercial sites and employ roughly 10,000 seasonal and full-time employees. The multifamily clients that we currently serve are some of the largest REITs in the United States, as well as many self-owned single-site operators. The goal of our presentation today is really to help managers better understand what drives the cost changes year to year and truly get a handle on the budget process, giving you the tools to accurately reflect what your expected costs will be for the upcoming season. Our first really area of focus today is understanding the cost drivers behind management and maintenance agreements themselves. How your pool operates today is not necessarily how it will operate in future years. Code changes occur rapidly. This year alone, we are seeing changes in New York State, throughout the state of Maryland, Virginia, and up and down the East Coast. For example, in Westchester County in New York, we just had a change that's being rolled out by the health departments, in the coming weeks, which takes the pools from non-guarded environments to different tiers of guard. Some facilities based on size will now require guards to be present at full time. Others will require someone with a CPR license only, and still others will require visits. Okay. Understanding these changes really will impact how your agreements change year over year. Another example that we're seeing, throughout most of the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic are changes within COMAR. COMAR is now providing exemptions to many sites that are under 2,500 square feet, have depth less than 5 feet in single bodies of water, thus removing the requirement altogether this year for lifeguards. Understanding these requirements is what it will enable you to really understand your RFP process. By accurately requesting the services that you truly need, you'll have a better idea of where you will land for the following year. When it comes to the PO requirements themselves, these are also changing. Sites now are being required to have chemical inspections hourly. in some cases 3 times a day, once a day, or even less frequently. Cost drivers on the maintenance side are a little bit more simple. In this case, it's really understanding the difference, the amount of visits you'll need to keep your facility both clean and operating within the constraints of the health code. Beyond that, it's understanding what you want out of the service. These all drive the expense. What the standard duties are and for your site may differ greatly from that of the expectation of your vendor. In some cases, maintenance duties are simply adding chemicals. In other cases, it may be a full vacuum of the site. Still, in other cases, providers are cleaning decks and furniture. Being clear with your vendor as to what your expectations are will ensure that you're receiving the correct proposal. Inclusions are also something that we have to consider. Vendors vary greatly as far as what their expectation is. Some will provide chemicals, some will provide open close service. Again, being clear on these conclusions from the onset will help level set the pricing that you're going to receive as you move forward with your proposal. Now, when we talk about these management agreements, the biggest impact is obviously labor. Scarcity of labor has had a huge impact post-COVID in our industry. It's not just the wages anymore that are dictated by the federal government, by the states. It's the willingness of employees to take these jobs at those rates. You may find, for example, in the state of Virginia, where the labor rates are relatively low, that the actual paid minimum wage surpasses the local requirement by several dollars per hour. Understanding these impacts is ultimately what will help to understand and drive the pricing you'll receive for the upcoming year. Other drivers include understanding the schedule per week. As minor violations and minor laws become more aggressive in various states, pool contractors are looking more and more to what the ideal week is, ensuring that guards and employees are not on shift for more than several hours at a time can greatly reduce the cost to the management agreement. Also, understanding the hours that the pool really needs to be open can be a huge impact. Using gate entry data through systems like AmenityLink can help you to understand when and how your facility is being utilized. The old adage of have the facility open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. is just not true these days. The cost to keep a facility open when there's only several residents in use is really not worth it in most cases. Another big impact on the labor side is school hours versus full-time labor. When school is in session, the days of having a full-time staff present are just no longer there. It's no longer necessary. What we recommend for sites that are really trying to control those costs is look at keeping your hours in line with the school schedule, and in even some cases, staying closed while schools are in session. The biggest thing you can do to ensure that you're receiving the proper pricing and ensure you're controlling your budget is reaching out to your vendor now. The process of getting into an agreement with a pool management company, although can be long if you're searching for a new agreement, it needs to start now in August, September, October, to get in line, get in place, and make sure that you can have the staff that you need to open and be successful. The other thing is to ensure that these agreements are apples to apples. Quite frequently, when we look at maintenance and management agreements, when we compare them company to company, we find large spans of service change. Ensuring that these services line up will ensure that you're receiving the proper price. And again, if you are making a change in your contractor, prepare for change. Contractors are often operating very differently when it comes to technology and staffing these days. Make sure you're clear with your expectations and make sure you're ready for change. And remember that the relationships matter. The partnership that you have with your contractors will ensure that you're receiving fair pricing and will ensure that you can weather various storms. Other than the maintenance and management side of budgeting with regards to aquatics, the big driver we talk about right now is our CapEx, our construction, and our various types of improvements. This is where there's a lot to be learned, especially at the site level. When preparing for a large project, make sure you share your timeline with your contractor. If you're going to be embarking on a deck replacement or a cope tile or a plaster, make sure your contractor understands when you're prepared to make that decision, as well as when you expect to execute the work. Job timelines vary greatly by the type of work. Some jobs are days, some are weeks, and some require permits that can take months to get into place. Major work should be done in the fall. This allows you to avoid the risk of weather delays, permit delays, and raw material shortages. Year to year, there is a pretty big lift when it comes to the different types of construction projects out there. Historically, we see increases come in pretty set regimen. When we talk about our white coats, our plasters, just because you received a price in the spring doesn't necessarily mean that price will still be good in the fall. Plasters typically increase 8 to 10% annually, and those increases are usually seen in March. Pool covers, which is also a common replacement item that we're seeing this time of year, those prices increase in July. It's always best to line up your pool cover installation, your pool cover contract prior to the summer, if you expect it to be in for the following fall. Again, those increases are about 8% in per July annually. Coping tile, in a very similar fashion to plaster. We see those increases at about 5% and in March. Again, there's a lot of incentive to get this work booked and done in the fall before those increases occur. Concrete is no exception. These change seasonally and have a much larger span, which are really based on raw materials. The point I'm trying to get across here is prepare for these CapEx projects. Getting the numbers from your contractor now, understanding that that price, if you're looking to do the work 6 months later, will likely increase by close to 10%. Be clear about your timelines, be clear about your expectations. To help you really drive to that plan, it's important to understand where your facility is today. To help you do that, we'll be sharing out this kind of small reserve study replacement schedule for everyone. What you'll see here is essentially a list of all of the equipment that you'll find at your facility, as well as all the hardscapes. We're going to provide this to everyone that's joining these calls today so that you can help understand the plan. Whether your replacement schedule will occur over the course of 1 year, 3, 5, or 7, this document will help you. What you'll see here is the average lifespan for each one of these items, as well as your date that you've installed, and it will give you a kind of a range of when to expect. In addition, you'll find the standard current market costs for each of these items. American Pool, as a partner and part of the brand alliance, would love to extend itself to help you fill this form out and make sure that you have an accurate plan moving forward. The large CapEx projects are not the only projects that we need to take into consideration. Annual maintenance is also a critical element. The expenses that are incurred during CapEx are usually larger. However, there are many small parts of repairs that are required annually outside of the CapEx process. When being presented with these small parts and repairs, timely approvals are critical. We continue to see supply chain issues with certain plastics and white goods, as well as constantly changing pricing. It's also important to understand that there are items that will replace annually based on wear and tear. Whereas you may only replace your vacuum when it breaks, items like your injector fittings and your tube assemblies will be replaced several times over the course of a season and should be budgeted accordingly. What should you budget each year? Typically, the industry standard is to budget $2,600 for every 100,000 gallons of volume. So if your pool is a smaller pool, 50,000 gallons apartment complex, $2,600 for parts and repair will probably satisfy your needs outside of your CapEx improvements. As the pools get larger, that number should increase exponentially. It's not just the parts that you need to consider when creating your budget for the upcoming year. If your agreement includes an opening and closing, it's covered by that contract. However, in most cases, when we look at these a la carte contracts, it's often forgotten that there's expenses associated with the opening and closing of a pool. Those expenses can vary greatly based on the volume of the pool. Under 50,000 gallons, you probably should anticipate a opening cost of $800 and a closing cost of $400. As the volume increases, those fees increase up to approximately $3,600 for an opening and $800 for a closing. There are things that can be done to mitigate those expenses. The use of postseason chemicals and winter service agreements can dramatically reduce the need to drain and clean the pool the following season, and thus reducing the overall impact on your budget. These protections not only have a benefit to your budget, they have a benefit to your CapEx side. The more time that can be spent protecting a plaster or cove tile or the various pieces of equipment in your pump room, the less likely and more time you'll get out of your filter tanks and your plasters. It is worth the investment to purchase algicides, phosphorase and stain enzymes to reduce the impact. That was a lot to take in a short amount of time. Really want to thank everyone for their time today. Wanted to open it up to any questions. American Pool is really happy to be partnered with the Alliance brands and really happy to be delivering quality service across the United States for many years. That's all I have, Joe, if you want to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Great presentation. Thank you all for joining. Again, we do have a QA, so if you haven't put your questions in there, please do so now. I do see a few, so I'll start off with those. Let me pull them up here. All right, Phil, question number one. Does entering into a multi-year agreement impact pricing?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's one of the questions we most commonly get, especially in the multifamily sector. You know, the old adage of the longer the agreement, the more discounts we can see, unfortunately, has kind of fallen to the wayside. Unstable label markets, as well as rapidly changing product pricing, has made it difficult for pool companies to anticipate those changes. There's really not a big impact on contract pricing year to year with the use of a multi-year agreement. However, multi-year agreements are still valuable. They're still valuable in building relationships and ensuring that you have the same team year in, year out.
Thank you, Phil. Well said. Let's go on to the second question we have here. Pool contract costs have been rising rapidly the past few years. Do you expect it to level off this year? And if not, when?
Yeah, that's another one that's pretty tricky. Again, because pool management agreements are so closely tied to the labor market, and because of that instability, we see them starting to level off. But again, the kind of ages of 3% increases year to year are relatively hard to predict. Do see some changes depending on the marketplace, but as the minimum wages continue to rise, you can expect to see those contract rates continue to increase closer to 6 to 8% per year.
All right, and I have a third question here. With regard to annual maintenance expenses, why are the costs seemingly so much higher than what I find online?
Okay. Another great question. The cost that you can find on Amazon or any of these online distributors, they typically are the cost of the product itself. They don't include the shipping, they don't include warranty, and they most certainly don't include installation. The cost you're going to see from a pool management provider or a maintenance provider is going to include those items. And as such, it will come with a heftier markup.
Well said, that makes sense. Well, thank you again, Phil. I don't see any other questions here. So thank you to our attendees again for joining our webinar today and for your great questions. As a reminder, we do have some great upcoming webinars. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll have Phil return later this afternoon, covering aquatics for the HOA and condo world, as well as fitness and wellness on August 22nd and property tech on August 24th. So thanks again. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you guys took a lot from this webinar, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Joe.